Good afternoon, and welcome to the Press Theatre for today's press conference featuring Ministers Freeland, Anand, and Fraser. I believe we do have some opening remarks, and then we will open the floor for questions. Ministers, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And ironically, Sean had the shorter commute joining us virtually. Bonjour. Je vais d'abord aborder le régime de pension du Canada et ensuite le progrès important accompli dans le cadre de notre plan pour aider les Canadiens et Canadiennes à épargner pour leur première mise de fonds. Par la suite, je vais céder la parole au ministre Sean Fraser, qui nous fournira une mise à jour au sujet de notre nouveau fonds pour accélérer la construction de logements et de la façon dont ces fonds aident les communautés à bâtir plus de logements plus rapidement. Et finalement, ce sera au tour de la ministre Anand de prendre la parole. So first, let me confirm that this Friday, I will be convening a special meeting of provincial and territorial finance ministers to discuss the Government of Alberta's proposed withdrawal from the Canada Pension Plan. For 6 decades, the CPP has been the bedrock of a secure and dignified retirement for Canadians, very much including the people of Alberta. I have heard the concerns of many Canadians, including many Albertans, about the Government of Alberta's proposal to withdraw Albertans from the CPP. The Calgary Chamber of Commerce has said that altering Alberta's pension system could compromise labour mobility, stability for businesses and consumers, and investor confidence. The Alberta Federation of Labour has said that the proposed move to a provincial pension plan would be, quote, truly scary for anyone contemplating a safe and stable retirement. Protecting the pensions of all Canadians is a priority for our government, and I look forward to an important conversation about this with my counterparts from across the country on Friday. We promised to create the tax-free first home savings account in our 2022 budget, and we launched those accounts in April of this year. I was very glad to announce on October 5th, just earlier this month, that 150,000 Canadians had opened a first home savings account. And I am so happy to announce today, less than a month later, that number has climbed to more than 250,000 Canadians who have opened a tax-free first home savings account. Notre gouvernement sait que l'augmentation du prix des maisons a fait en sorte que les Canadiens, plus particulièrement les jeunes, ont de plus en plus de mal à épargner en vue d'une mise de fonds. Le logement est au cœur de notre plan économique et le compte d'épargne libre d'impôt pour l'achat d'une première propriété est un élément essentiel de notre plan sur le logement. Le compte d'épargne libre d'impôt pour l'achat d'une première propriété permet aux Canadiens d'épargner jusqu'à 40 000 $ pour l'achat de leur première maison. Compared to just 26 days ago, 100,000 more Canadians are saving up for their first home tax-free. This enthusiasm for the tax-free first home savings account shows that the dream and the reality of first home ownership is alive and well in Canada. And through our economic plan, our federal government is going to continue to build more homes faster for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. In the past few weeks, we have taken real, concrete action to continue leading the way in addressing Canada's housing challenge. Je vous remercie et je vais maintenant céder la parole au ministre Fraser. Sean, over to you.
Merci Chrystia, merci tout le monde. Merci pour des questions juste avant le petit discours. Folks, we're making serious progress when it comes to the housing policies that we are adopting. And sorry, apologies. Is there a microphone on in the room? I'm getting a lot of feedback. Okay, is it coming through okay for you? Okay, I'll continue. Despite the progress we're seeing as a result of the GST cut, as a result of the Canada Mortgage Bond, as a result of the Housing Accelerator Fund, we know there's a lot more to do. But I do have a lot of optimism as a result of some of the deals that we've been able to conclude, as well as the movement we're seeing from municipalities right across the country when it comes to actually changing the way that they build homes. To date, we have signed agreements with London, Halifax, Brampton, Hamilton, Vaughan, and Kelowna. The combined impact of these 6 agreements is going to see more than 13,000 homes built in those cities over the next 3 years. And in those cities alone, the projections are that nearly 110,000 homes will be built as a result of the changes that they're making. The kinds of changes that we're seeing cities adopt allow for more density. They are making it legal to build more homes in neighborhoods that previously did not allow for the kind of density that's going to create more space for people to live in their respective cities. What's very exciting, although 6 deals is a good start, given that this has been in motion only for about 6 weeks, we are seeing extraordinary movement in cities like Calgary, Edmonton, Kitchener, Moncton. Obviously, nous avons conclu une entente avec le Québec, avec les détails dont l'avenir très vite. Mais nous avons des opportunités pour continuer notre travail et collaborer avec la municipalité avec la plus grande ambition pour construire du logement pour tous les Canadiens. In addition to the Housing Accelerator Fund and the excellent news the Minister Freeland has just shared with now 250,000 Canadians, disproportionately young Canadians, who are saving up to buy their first home through the First Home Savings Account, we will be launching a new initiative this week. The Housing Supply Challenge is an initiative that was previously funded and had several rounds play out. Later this week, we are going to be launching the 5th round of the Housing Supply Challenge. This program invites citizens, stakeholders, and experts to propose solutions that are going to help increase Canada's housing supply. The range of different kinds of activities that we will be looking at in this round are going to focus on how industry can propose to create more efficient and cost-effective housing production system. What do I mean by housing production system? Every aspect of the process to get homes built will be included, from conceptualization to design to financing to approvals to construction to operations. We're also going to have a specific carve-out for nonprofit actors focused on community housing. This program is designed to generate ideas that will have a systems-level approach. It's not so much about the individual successful recipients who will receive funding to implement an idea, but it's to demonstrate new ideas that could be applied at scale to help address the housing crisis more fully. During previous rounds, the kinds of projects that we've seen go ahead include additional productive ability for additional dwelling units that are leading to new prefabricated homes that are smaller than a typical single detached home, but can exist on the same property with a 30-day production turnaround at a cost for $75,000 per unit to actually manufacture these kinds of homes. We've also seen new modular design that is led by Indigenous communities that is respecting traditional design elements, but building in modern sustainability and accessibility components to the construction. We've seen further awards made under previous rounds that have resulted in certain companies leading the way when it comes to standardized production for mass timber homes. And we've collaborated previously with academic institutions to have them develop a kit of parts, so to speak, that's designed to offer homes that are prefabricated that are tied to meet local building codes. These are the kinds of ideas that we are generating through the Housing Supply Challenge, and we'll have more details on the rollout of this program later this week. Thank you very much. C'est un plaisir d'être ici dans l'environnement virtuel. Et c'est un plaisir pour moi de porter la parole avec ma collègue ministre Anand.
Merci beaucoup, Sean et Chrystia, et bonjour tout le monde. Notre gouvernement travaille fort pour obtenir des résultats concrets pour les Canadiens, et c'est pourquoi le Canada a une cote de crédit AAA, un taux de chômage faible et le ratio de la dette du PIB le plus faible du G7. Recently, we saw a slight decrease in inflation numbers. The public accounts, which I tabled last week, reported that our deficit decreased by 33% compared to the projected deficit in budget 2022. as we did during the COVID-19 pandemic, we can and we will continue to pivot and refocus our priorities to decrease our deficit. And unlike the opposition, we will do so without cutting supports that Canadians depend on. We decreased our projected deficit while increasing our supports to Canadians, whether through increasing old age security, whether by offering the dental benefit to Canadians, whether by ensuring that we have a grocery rebate in place, and by supporting families through the Canada Child Benefit, as well as $10 a day childcare throughout the country. Our goal is to continue to invest in Canadians all through these difficult moments and beyond. And so what we know is that Canadians are legitimately worried about the cost of living and especially about the cost of groceries. Et comme vous le savez, notre gouvernement va continuer de travailler jour après jour pour rendre le coût de la vie plus abordable pour les Canadiens. And I want to assure you that every file that we examine at Treasury Board, and that is once our cabinet approves a particular policy, the program, once formulated, goes through Treasury Board. Every file is examined with a view to ensuring that affordability issues are top of mind. We will continue to support Canadians during this economic time. Now, for example, two things that Minister Champagne announced last week was that our government will triple the funding for the contributions program for nonprofit, consumer, and voluntary organizations, and also that we will support consumer organizations in identifying harmful practices such as shrinkflation, meaning that practices where higher prices are in place for lower sizes of products in the retail sector. Now, I just want to close by addressing Bill C-56. That's our affordability legislation, la loi sur le logement et l'épicerie à prix abordable. Grâce à ce projet, nous allons accroître la concurrence, ce qui aura pour effet de réduire la pression sur les prix. And at the very heart of that legislation is the view that Canadians expect us to fight for them, and that is exactly what we are doing in this legislation. And to close, I'd like to call on my colleagues across the House of Commons to vote in favor of this bill so that we can see the removal of the GST on rentals, as well as increased competition and lower grocery prices in Canada. Pour ceux et celles qui veulent appuyer notre population, c'est exactement tout ce que je dois faire et nous devons faire pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Merci.
Thank you, ministers. I'm told you have about 15 minutes for questions, and so in the interest of time, we are going to do one question per reporter in the room. If we can get through a single round and go to a second one, that's wonderful. So we will now turn over to tricks and treats, questions, and we'll begin with Mylène.
Bonjour, ma question est pour la ministre Freeland. Je me demandais, est-ce que vous ne trouvez pas que l'exemption qui est donnée pour le mazout, c'est une façon de diluer votre politique pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre?
Non.
Très réponse.
Absolument pas. On a fait cela pour avoir une politique efficace et pragmatique pour réduire les émissions. Le mazout est très particulier. Les émissions du mazout sont très, très élevées. Le mazout coûte très cher et ce sont les gens en général moins nantis et ruraux qui utilisent le mazout. Alors, c'est le gros bon sens de créer un programme qu'on a créé pour aider ces gens de changer d'un système de réchauffement qui utilise le mazout à un système écologique et un système qui coûte moins cher. Mais ces gens-là n'ont pas de l'argent pour le faire aujourd'hui et ils n'ont pas de l'argent pour le faire vite. Alors, on a un programme maintenant qui va permettre à ces gens de faire plus vite cette transition. C'est la logique.
Risa Patel.
Hi, Minister Freeland. There were some reports about a concept paper from the Israeli government suggesting that residents in Gaza would be transferred to Egypt, with some of them potentially being resettled in Canada. Did Israel make you aware of this proposal? And in general, is Canada open to accepting Palestinian refugees?
I'm unaware of those reports.
Valérie.
Merci. Ma question est pour vous, Mme Freeland. On nous dit qu'au sein du cabinet, c'est vous qui avez poussé pour qu'on exempte le mazout des redevances sur la tarification sur le carbone. Maintenant qu'on voit le premier ministre de la Saskatchewan menacer de retirer ou de ne pas renvoyer à Ottawa les revenus tirés de la tarification, il y a plusieurs collègues de vos collègues, probablement des autres provinces, qui ne sont pas contents non plus. Est-ce que c'était vraiment la meilleure des solutions, considérant que ça crée un autre problème?
Ce n'est pas correct de discuter nos discussions au sein du cabinet, alors je ne vais pas le faire. Et j'ai juste expliqué le logique très pratique, le logique qui pense des réalités des gens sur le terrain, qui a motivé notre décision. Et je veux juste souligner que le programme qu'on a mis en place pour la transition du mazout à un système plus propre pour le réchauffement des maisons, c'est un programme qui est ouvert à toutes les provinces et territoires.
Brian.
Hi, Minister Freeland. Brian Platt from Bloomberg. You were in Washington recently. It looks likely the Prime Minister will be there later this week. The biggest irritant between the two countries still is your plan for a digital services tax. Can you give us an update on where that's at? Are you still confident you can reach a deal on this, or do you still intend to bring one in at the start of next year?
I was in Washington last week, and we did have some good conversations about the DST, including at officials level. I remain cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to reach an understanding with our American partners.
Hi, Mr. Freeland. Yesterday, Premier Ford and Mayor Chow wrote you a letter asking the federal government to join their working group focused on addressing Toronto's financial situation. Just wondering what your response was and what role you see for the federal government in helping Toronto, given you rejected Mayor Chow's request for financial assistance earlier this year.
We agreed to join the working group, and the Deputy Minister of Finance, Chris Forbes, will be joining that group.
We're so efficient today, guys. Greg.
I tried. I know we have limited time.
Greg.
Greg Quinn, Market News International. Mr. Freeland, I believe Bank of Canada Governor Macklem is saying that spending across all levels of government is starting to make his inflation fight a bit harder. How do you balance this in your fiscal plans against any obligations you might have under the Liberal Party's supply and confidence agreement with the NDP?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I reviewed the governor's remarks carefully, and indeed, I talk to him pretty often. And he pointed out that over the past year, fiscal policy has not gotten in the way of monetary policy. I was glad to hear him observe that. We've been very conscious of that and very mindful of that. He did talk about the need for fiscal policy of all levels of government not to get in the way of monetary policy going forward. I am mindful of that also. And I will also point out, as the governor pointed out, that Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7. We have had the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation from the COVID peak in the G7, and we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio.
And I'll just add to that in terms of fiscal policy, we are very concerned with ensuring that our spending is focused on our government's top priorities. That is why the Minister of Finance placed in the budget 2023 the necessity for me as President of the Treasury Board to undertake a spending review. I will be tabling the results in its first iteration of that spending review in November in the supplementary estimates, and then again in the main estimates in the first quarter of next year. All that to say that ministers across our government are submitting proposals to me, and all of those proposals are their effort in their respective departments to ensure that we do not have wasteful spending and that our spending is actually directed to our government's priorities, the top of which is affordability for Canadians. Through this spending review, we will be refocusing $15 billion of spending over 5 years and $4 billion each year thereafter. And I think that is an important lens in which to examine the relationship between fiscal and monetary policy.
Yeah, I agree.
In parliamentary parlance, I see the clock at 8 minutes after 2, so if Minister Anand, I understand you might need to leave.
I will.
Okay. Anyway, we'll continue down our list. Our next question is from Mia Rabson, Canadian Press.
I'm just wondering if the issue with home heating oil mostly is the cost of the oil itself, and we've acknowledged that home heating oil is worse for the environment than other sources. Why is taking the carbon price itself off home heating oil the answer to the affordability issue? And are you not just undermining your carbon policy overall, particularly when you now have even premiers like in Saskatchewan saying they're just going to stop paying it?
No, we're not undermining the policy overall. Home heating oil has some very specific characteristics. Home heating oil is a very polluting form of heating oil. Home heating oil also is really expensive, and home heating oil tends to be used by low-income and rural people. And when you take those three characteristics together, it makes a lot of sense to do what the Prime Minister announced last week, which is to create a program that will accelerate the transition from home heating oil to heat pumps, to create a program that will allow people who are using home heating oil, who are paying a lot for that heavily polluting form of oil, but who just don't have the money to buy a heat pump right now, to make it possible for them to make a change that is going to be good for them, good for their family budgets, and good for the planet. But people can't make that change if they don't have the money to do it. And that is what we recognize. That is what we heard across the country. And that is why we've put that program in place. This is going to accelerate the transition and going to make life more affordable for Canadians. It's the right thing to do. And I do want to emphasize that the top-up to the heat pump program is available to any province that wants to participate.
David Thurton, CBC.
Hi, Minister Freeland. You said that you watched Macklin's comments yesterday at committee. I'm wondering what you think about what he had to say about whether or not the carbon price is fueling inflation. And Conservatives, their takeaway from that was that it's contributing as much as 16% to inflation. So is the carbon price fueling inflation?
I said I read his comments carefully. When it comes to the carbon price, I think the verdict of economists in Canada and around the world is absolutely clear. And the verdict is that this is the most efficient way to address climate change. It is the most efficient way to reduce emissions. That's something that the IMF has pointed out. The IMF has very explicitly commended Canada's price on pollution as a model for countries around the world. And just a couple of days ago, the chief economist of the IMF, or maybe her name is the deputy managing director. Anyway, the number 2 at the IMF wrote a piece in the Financial Times talking about how governments needed to use a price on pollution as a way to fight climate change. One of the arguments she used there, which I very much agree with, is we are at a time when, as a country and countries around the world, need to act urgently to address climate change. That is an economic necessity. We need to do it if we want to have the jobs and the industries of the future here in Canada. At the same time, we are operating in a world of fiscal constraints. And that is one of many reasons that a price on pollution, which is the most efficient way to reduce emissions, makes a lot of sense. And that is why Canada's price on pollution is admired around the world.
Kyle?
Minister, I'm wondering if you have a date for the fall economic statement yet. When is that coming? It is the fall.
I announced a meeting that I'm hosting on Friday, but that is the only date I'm announcing today. I'm not announcing that either.
We have time for a question online, so we're going to go to Paul Vieira. I'm going to unmute you now, Paul. Just a reminder that it's just one question. Go ahead. I think you're unmuted.
Minister, the opposition parties have called on you to block the RBC HSBC deal. Will you heed that request? And what time frame are you looking at in delivering a verdict?
Thanks for the question, Paul. There are very clear rules set out in Canada governing transactions of this sort. And there are clear rules about the institutional input into decisions made about those transactions. We are a rule of law country and a government that believes in supporting our foundational institutions. So we will be following those rules carefully. Given that this is a transaction which is still under review, I'm not going to say anything specific further.
And that concludes today's press conference. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Minister. Wishing you all a safe and happy Halloween.
Okay, and if I could just say I appreciate getting into the spirit of today. Where's your costume? Finance Minister. You know what? With Terrible Mother, I'm not sure what they're going as. That's a terrible thing to admit. Some of them are older. They don't have to tell me these things. But I do have a 14-year-old. I should know what he's going as. Thanks a lot. Happy Halloween.